to imagine the Philippine educational landscape without the private schools. The private schools help the state fulfill its mandate of making quality education accessible to all Filipinos. It is in recognition of this role that the Fund for Assistance to Private Education, a permanent trust fund for private education, was established through Executive Order 156 on November 5, 1968. The Private Education Assistance Committee, or the PEAC, was created as the trustee of the fund. The PEAC is composed of the Secretary of Education as the ex officio chair and a representative each from the National Economic Development Authority, Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, Philippine Association of Colleges and Universities, and Association of Christian Schools, Colleges, and Universities. For the development of private education, the PEAC takes on the role of funder, advocate, partner, and enabler. A national secretariat headed by an executive director executes the policies, programs, and initiatives of the PEAC for private education. In 1989, a landmark piece of legislation, RA 6728, or the Government Assistance to Students and Teachers in Private Education, or GAITF, was passed. The GAITF Act, which was amended by RA 8545 in 1998, institutionalized government assistance to private education in the country. The Educational Service Contracting, or ESC, Teacher Salary Subsidy, or TSS, Senior High School Voucher Program, the In-Service Training, or INSET, and Research are part of the Department of Education's GAITF program. The PEAC implements the GAITF program given the track record of the PEAC in program management. The PEAC has been involved in the development of the ESC, from piloting a scheme, which was a precursor to the ESC in 1982 to 1986, to implementing the ESC in 1986 to 1991, and from 1996 up to the present. The ESC today has close to 1 million beneficiaries. Part of the PEAC infrastructure for the GAITF program is the Regional Secretariat. The PEAC-RS is headed by the Regional Program Director, who designates a Regional Program Coordinator for the day-to-day program implementation in the region. The PEAC has the following responsibilities in the GAITF program: orientation, ESC certification, SHS voucher applications, processing, monitoring, resolving cases of schools with adverse findings, regular meetings and consultations with stakeholders, research and data gathering, in-service training. The PEAC is also accredited as a local continuing professional development, or CPD, provider by the Professional Regulation Commission, or PRC. Participants of the INSET programs offered by the PEAC have the opportunity to earn the required CPD units for the renewal of their professional licenses. From 2012 to 2017, the PEAC trained a total of more than 70,000 junior high school teachers, and since 2016, an estimated 17,000 SHS teachers. The PEAC also implements its own programs of assistance. The Assistance to Programs and Initiatives to Reform Education, or ASPIRE, gave funding support in the amount of 33.7 million to 99 projects of private educational associations since 2015 to 2016. The Research for School Improvement Towards Excellence has assisted 79 private school administrators and teachers writing their theses and dissertation since 2015 to 2016. The Dissemination Assistance to Research and Education, or DARE, has supported 16 faculty members who presented their papers in international conferences abroad since it was launched in 2016 to 2017. The Philippine Education Research Journal is an online resource for decision makers, policy makers, and practitioners in education. Its editorial board consists of highly respected educators and researchers. The Philippine Education Conference is an opportunity for school administrators and teachers to learn from educational leaders and experts here and abroad as they discuss educational issues, concerns, trends, and innovations. Recognizing the inherent strengths of the private schools in achieving excellence in Philippine education, the PEAC is committed to promoting private education as an integral part of our educational system.
Good day, everyone. I'm Mady Malanta, the Training Development Unit Associate of the PEAC National Secretariat. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar for Values Education on streamlining the K-12 curriculum, an approach to determining which standards and competencies to teach. This program is part of the pre-opening activities and interventions of the PEAC to assist private schools in their recovery and readiness of operations for school year 2020-2021 amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Our speaker this afternoon is a graduate of Canosa College in San Pablo City, Laguna. She took her Master's of Arts major in Religious and Values Education at Ateneo de Manila University and currently finishing her doctoral degree at De La Salle University, Manila. She also taught professional theology at De La Salle College of St. Benilde in Antipolo, and currently a Christian living teacher at La Salle, Antipolo. She is also a junior high school PEAC trainer and coordinator for values education. Their teachers are speaker for today, Ms. Reina B. Hara. Good afternoon, Ma'am Rain.
Good afternoon, Mama Yi. Should I share screen now?
Yes.
All right, so good afternoon. I'd like to begin my presentation this afternoon by quoting a certain part of the MELC's briefer, which it says, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact various governments and economies around the world, even schools are not spared from its crippling effects. However, UNESCO reiterates its stand, in spite of the circumstances, education cannot wait. If learning stops, we will lose human capital. Thus, it's my fervent hope this afternoon that whatever you learn in this webinar will help you deliver quality education amidst this trying time. Good afternoon, I am Ina, and welcome to this webinar entitled Streamlining the K-12 Curriculum, an Approach to Determining which K-12 Standards and Competencies to Teach. For this afternoon, our focus subject is values education. And so I'd like to welcome all the values ed teachers joining me this afternoon. I want you to feel comfortable and relaxed and kindly take down notes as part of the reminders in this afternoon's webinar. Kindly take also the chance to ask questions after the talk and take down or download handouts after the session. All right. So I think for you to have better understanding also of the presentation this afternoon, I would suggest that you have copies of the following documents: the 2016 Curriculum Guide, the MELC's Briefer, MELC's Matrix, and the PEAC Certification Instrument for you to know the standards of compliance. Another reminder that I want to tell you is that kindly view the screen presentation in full screen on your device to better appreciate the content. So maybe this afternoon you have questions like, what will be my takeaways from this webinar? What will be the questions that we will be trying to answer in our discussion? So are you ready to begin? To begin with, I'd like to give this focus question to everyone attending. How will schools now in the new normal be able to cover the contents of the K-12 curriculum, specifically in the area of values education? In order to achieve this end, we have the following objectives in mind. So since we are all teachers here, it's good that we begin our discussion today with some learning targets or objectives. All right, so first objective, we will discuss the rationale and parts of the DepEd MELC's curriculum guide for school year 2020-2021. Second, we will explain the process of streamlining K-12 standards and competencies. Third, we will relate the importance of alignment in streamlining with PEAC recertification. And lastly, we will apply that process to selected unit of study and values education for curriculum mapping, identification of instructional materials, and preparation of the unit calendar. Please take note that all the things that we will talk about in this webinar are all connected to the discussion with regards to the PEAC's recertification process. So, are you ready? Let's begin our discussion. Everyone is invited to give your hashtag. Maybe you could pick out the big ideas or the keywords that you got from the discussion, and then please give your hashtag so that you will be able to participate well in our discussion this afternoon. All right, to begin with, we know already that the Interagency Task Force, or IATF, made an announcement that private schools opening in June must get IATF okay, which means that they comply with the minimum, or the school should comply with the minimum health standards, and that as of now, no face-to-face classes can be held on campus. But as teachers, we must also have an eye, or keep an eye as regards the set school opening in August, because there are discussions and proposal that this might be moved to a later date. But in the light of the directives of the IATF and that of the DepEds, what do private schools need to do in order to be ready for school year 2020-2021? If you'll be visiting DepEd Order 00 Series of 22, it says that private schools must submit 3 important documents. What are these? First, schools' plan for compliance with minimum health standards should be submitted. Second, the learning continuity plan, which includes the curriculum of the school. And third, school year calendar, which will indicate the various instructional modalities that your school will be adapting. And so, speaking of requirements, PEAC has also announced some requirements, particularly for certification. ESC schools that are due for recertification would have to submit their requirements from September 1 to 30, 2020, and part of the requirements is the curriculum map of the schools. Schools need to be ready for remote type of recertification called e-recertification starting November 20 until March 2021. Thus, we can say that the topic in this afternoon's webinar will indeed assist the schools as they prepare requirements, which will include the preparation of curriculum maps. Now, I'd like to give another question to all the participants this afternoon. What do ESC participating private schools need to do in order to be ready for the so-called e-recertification? On screen, you see 3 very important materials. First would be the PEAC Certification Assessment Instrument, or known as the PEAC CAI, or what we call as the Self-Rating and Evidence of Compliance. Second, the PEAC Schools Recovery and Readiness Assessment Tool results. And thirdly, would be the PEAC School Recovery Readiness Plan in line with the DepEd's Learning Continuity Plan. As announced in the PEAC-sponsored webinar 2 weeks ago, schools need to complete the assessment instrument regarding school readiness and recovery. Aside from that, schools need to come up with a plan in line with DepEd's Learning Continuity Plan, the results of the assessment tool, and the readiness plan will be attached to the self-ratings of the school using PEAC certification assessment instrument. And of course, the preparation of evidence of compliance. What will be submitted online is the PEAC certification assessment self-ratings, and all the other documents or evidences should be prepared for online viewing by the PEAC certifiers. I hope you were able to get all those. Okay, in other words, that very important school curriculum document is part of DepEd's Learning Continuity Plan and the PEAC recertification. So the question now is, how will ESC schools in school year 2020-2021 prepare the school curriculum if it needs to be submitted both to DepEd and to PEAC? So, in order to prepare the school curriculum, we'll look at the very important document as I'm projecting now. This is the curriculum map. What you see on screen is a sample diary curriculum map. Let's try to see the parts that make up the map. We have, if you will look at the map, we have actually 9 columns with 9 different headings. The first column contains the term or the month or the time the topic contents will be implemented. It may contain the quarter. About the second column indicate the unit topic or the content. And the third and the fourth column will contain the standards, both content and performance standards. The fifth column, however, contain the competencies or skills. Then the sixth column contain the assessment followed by the activities and the resources. And finally, because we are values education teachers, let us highlight the last column, which contains the institutional core values of the school curriculum. Moving on, given the number of columns that you have to complete in the said summary sample diary curriculum map, the question now is, how can ESC schools prepare a curriculum map that covers the K-12 standards and competencies in the new normal and meets recertification requirements? Before we dwell into completion of these different parts, let us first ask ourselves, what will the new normal look like as far as our educational system is concerned? Here are the facts. Aside from school distancing or social distancing, we have to accept the fact that the school calendar will be shortened to 33 weeks this school year. Is that a concern, teachers? Of course, that is a big concern. Then we look into varied instructional modalities, which means to say that we will not see our students every day. It means to say that we will do synchronous or asynchronous learning, or probably offline learning through modules, because our contact with them face-to-face will be very limited. It will also signal reduced class time, and we also expect frequent disruption due to outbreaks. In other words, the new normal is telling that teaching time will be affected, and therefore, what are the adjustments that we need to make as teachers, as designers of learning? So how then do we create that curriculum if we do not have any more the luxury of time or the regular number of days that we used to have before this public health crisis? There are 3 things again that I'd like you to note or to consider. You look at the screen. First, we'll look at the DepEd Subject Curriculum Guide, the Curriculum Guide of 2016. Then we also consider the contents of the newly released MELCs, or the Most Essential Learning Competence Matrix. And lastly, we'll look at the standards of compliance in the PEAC certification assessment instrument. All these documents are utilized or will be utilized, referred to, and incorporated in preparing the school's curriculum map for the incoming school year. So let's take a look at each of these sources. So look at your screen. First question is the 2016 curriculum guide replaced by the MELCs or the most essential learning competencies? Teachers, values ed teachers, what is your answer? Please show your hashtags. Okay, thank you. Some are saying yes, some are saying no. What does the MELCs itself tell us? According to the guidelines found on page 2, and I quote, releasing the MELCs does not downplay the standards set by the K-12 curriculum guides. Rather, this serves as guide to teachers as they address the instructional needs of the learners while ensuring that curriculum standards are maintained and achieved. From this quotation, we can truly say that the MELCs matrix does not, I repeat that, does not replace the 2016 curriculum guide. So those who answered no, it did not replace the 2016 curriculum guide, you are all correct. Okay, if you read further through the Filipino briefer on page 33, it explains, and I quote, tandaan na ang layunin sa pagbuo ng MELCs ay hindi upang palitan ang kasalukuyang kurikulum, kundi upang magabayan ang mga guro sa pagtukoy ng mga kompetensing mas kinakailangan ng mga mag-aaral sa taong panuruang 2020-2021. Sa huli, hinihikayat pa rin ang mga guro na sumangguni sa curriculum guide referring to the 2016 curriculum guide. Kung sa tingin nila ay hindi sapat ang mga kompetensing tinukoy sa MELCs. So Tagalog, very clear. Here we see that the use of MELCs is not prescriptive. It is what one briefer says, it's suggestive. That's why it is best to look at the two documents and try to see what are common and what are differences. Remember, we are highlighting here our role as designers. There is a certain way of looking at the MELCs that we need to be aware of. The MELCs, my dear teachers, values ed teachers, is only a temporary arrangement. That any decision we make on the use of the MELCs, we must always have in mind the return to the full use of the 2016 curriculum guide. In other words, we need to strike a balance between what we have in the existing 2016 curriculum guide and the suggestions that are given in the MELCs, so that it's very clear the matrix or the MELCs matrix does not replace the existing 2016 curriculum guide. Okay, the third source that we have to consider would be the standards of compliance set by the PEAC, most especially in the areas of curriculum, assessment, and instruction. What you see on screen is the tool that PEAC certifiers will be using, and we have here the expectations regarding what a school curriculum map should contain. These are the requirements, and if you try to look at the requirements, these are just a reiteration of what DepEd is saying regarding the way we prepare the curriculum. A lot that is being mentioned in the standards of compliance are also being mentioned in the briefers of the MELCs matrix. So later on, we will revisit the tool and we will try to see what are the recurring words that you see in the tool that also point out to what the curriculum guide and MELCs matrix are saying. So given the challenge of coming up with a curriculum map, the question now is, how do we answer this question? And the question is, how can ESC schools prepare a curriculum map that covers the K-12 standards and competencies in the new normal and meets recertification requirements at the same time? The answer is very simple. We prepare our curriculum map by using DepEd Curriculum Guide and our DepEd MELCs and the PEAC Certification Assessment Instrument. These are the three sources that are very important in the preparation of the curriculum map. So now let us try to look closely at the contents of this curriculum map. And your question might be, where do we get all this? Let's begin with the unit topic and the standards. Okay, all this can be found in the 2016 curriculum guide as well as in the MELCs. So it's best that you put the two documents side by side so you will see for yourself. Where do the competencies come from? So that's the next one. Okay, again, from the DepEd curriculum guide of the 2016 and the MELCs matrix. Now, if you will look at the documents on the curriculum guide and the MELCs matrix, you won't be able to see any suggestion on assessment and activities because all these are provided or will be provided by us teachers, the subject teachers. We are the designers, we too are the assessors, and in the end, we are also facilitators. And the last column, the institutional core values, we take them out from the school's vision, mission, and objectives. And we make sure that they align with the rest of the components. So in today's webinar, we will be going to have a walkthrough of these different parts of the curriculum map. So in other words, if you look at the slide, you see arrows. Did you see arrows? Okay, hashtag arrows. What are the arrows for? What do you think do the arrows indicate? What do they remind us of? Many of us will say that the arrows establish connections, and you are correct. Because we, as we complete the different parts of our curriculum map, the CAI is always looking at the alignment among all the parts. So it's good. It is not just a matter of making sure that the columns are filled up. We need to make sure that whatever is required by the standards and the competencies, we must have corresponding assessments, activities, resources, and the appropriate institutional core values that we are going to be integrating. Now, take note of this hashtag, take note of these big words, keywords, alignment, integration. These are very important as you complete the curriculum map. Hashtag alignment, hashtag integration. Okay, so as we go back to this document of PEAC, this is Certification Assessment Instrument or PEAC CAI, which will be used to assess your curriculum assessment and instruction. You see, if you will take a look at the screen, you see the word alignment recurring, and it highlights two very important kinds of alignments. What are these? What are you seeing? Hashtag horizontal and hashtag vertical alignments. When you say horizontal, what does it mean? Okay, horizontal means that the entries from the left column to the right of your curriculum map have connections. And when you say vertical alignment, pointing out to the progression of skills, thus the term vertical learning progression. It means that the skills or the entries contained in each column from top to bottom should progress. They should be aligned. They should be ladderized. Hashtag ladderized. So going back to the different parts of the curriculum map, let's take a short review of what you mean when you say content and performance standard. I think some of you here have been attending previous insets. And during our insets, we have been conducting every summer. There are two basic questions that we would like to ask. And when we look at content and performance standards, or when we look at the content and performance standards, these are the questions that we usually ask. When you say content standards, you are merely asking the question, what content or skills will I teach? And what am I expecting students to know and be able to do? Content standards covers a specified scope of sequential topics, identifying the set of essential knowledge and understanding that must be learned. And if we are to be true to our promise of preparing our students after grade 12 for work, For college and for life, the performance standard will give essence and meaning to the concepts that we are teaching as it seeks to answer the question, this is the second question, how will the students be able to use what they have learned? The performance standards describe the abilities, skills that the learners are expected to demonstrate in relation to the content standards. And as they apply the skills to concrete real-world experiences that will make learning more worthwhile and meaningful, as mentioned in the MELC Science Briefer, page 42, as I am showing now, the K-12 basic education curriculum is or will remain standards-based with the presence of the content and the performance standard. Even though the title of the document is Most Essential Learning Competencies, we still need to remember that these MELCs are still based on standards. They are anchored on the standards. So if you look at the copy of MELC's matrix, you will notice that the standards are very alive and will be used. So what is important to remember then is contained in the guidelines on the use of MELCs. You will see this on page 3. And I read, the content and performance standards are directly lifted from the curriculum guides. Its inclusion is to emphasize that the identification of the MELCs is anchored on the prescribed standards and not a departure from the standards-based basic education curriculum. Thus, teachers, values ed teachers, we are encouraged to refer to the 2016 curriculum guides in unpacking the MELCs. Later on, we will do some unpacking techniques. What is interesting in this quotation from this briefer, it tells us that the guide in the use of MELCs is that we always need to look at the competencies in relation to the standards. We cannot be teaching the competencies separately from the standards. So we always have to ask ourselves, what is the connection between the competencies and the standards, or are they connected? The second thing that we need to consider is that teachers still need to do the process of unpacking. So we don't just simply copy, we do unpacking. The MELCs may not be sufficient. We may need to break down into sub-competencies, the competencies, though they are called the most essential ones. And even add more competencies in order to achieve the standards. So I repeat that. We could even add more competencies in order to achieve the standards. Our decision in the choice of the competencies will always be guided by the content and performance standards. And as you will see later on, between the content and performance standards, there will be no more emphasis on the performance standard. Thus, we can say that the content standard is going to be at the service of the performance standard. Going back to the two questions on the standards a while ago, if the content standard will be answering the question, what will the students know and be able to do? While the performance standards will answer the question, where will students use that or how will they apply that in their daily lives? So without content, performance can never be achieved in its true and authentic sense. Hashtag content and performance standards. Now let's go back to our summary sample diary curriculum map. So the next component that we have to accomplish will be the competencies or the skills. Now this is the part that will take some time for us to really think about. Where are we going to get the list of competencies and skills? That's another question. Are we going to think about them? Or are we going to compose them? We are going to get them again from the DepEd Curriculum Guide and from the DepEd MELCs Matrix. It is either we use both, or if we find in one quarter that it's easier to use the existing guide, then we can use the 2016 guide, or probably in another quarter, we can use the contents of the MELCs Matrix. Just remember one very important thing. Regardless of the document that you will use and the competencies that you will write under this column, always ask yourself, do this lead my students to the attainment of the standards? The entries under this column are determined by both the content and the performance standards. All right, now let's take a closer look at the competencies. What do we mean by the word competencies? What's the meaning of the word competencies? Competencies, according to the MELC's Briefer of Science, page 40, these refer to the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that students need in order to demonstrate a particular learning activity or the tasks needed in every lesson as explained in the document. These standards are further represented as learning competencies. This quotation tells us that there is an alignment. There should be an alignment among the standards, competencies, and activities. Thus, you see the arrows pointing to the right, to the left. The standards will determine the competencies, and the competencies in turn will determine the activities. So you see the connection. The activities should be chosen in such a way that they help develop the competencies, and the competencies in turn are necessary in order to achieve the standards. So please remember the said connections. So what does it mean when you say essential learning competencies? The guidelines on the use of MELC's page 2 list down the characteristics that make a learning competency essential. First, it should be aligned with national, state, or local standards or framework, or what do we hope our students to become? Our students to become problem solvers maybe. Will the learning competencies promote the skill of problem solving? This is a question that this characteristic would like to answer. Another is, will it allow the students to exhibit the 7 C's? I hope you can still remember the 7 C's of the 21st century, where at the center is creativity. Number 2, it connects the content to higher concepts across content areas. Will it prepare the students for the next grade level or for succeeding grade levels? Is it applicable to real life situation? Meaning to say, we move beyond the procedural way of teaching to real life application. And that will have more meaning. If students left school after this grade, it would be important for them to have this competence above many others. And it wouldn't be expected that most students would learn this through their parents and communities, if not taught in school, given our situation now. All right, so the document in MELC's tell us why there is a need to have what you call the most essential learning competencies, as the Department of Education anticipates the challenges employing various schemes in the delivery of the learning standards due to this pandemic. The number of the identified essential learning competencies per quarter were further reduced, thus the term most essential learning competencies or MECs. Now the question, however, that you have in mind at the moment is that how much was reduced? Let's try to see. Right. From the 14,171 learning competencies, they were reduced by 60%. And now we are only talking about 5,689 learning competencies from the 14,171. So it's almost a half. And only 40% remains because there's no enough time to cover the 14,000 plus competencies. The question now is, what was the basis of keeping the 40%? So how were these MECs identified? What criterion, what specific criterion was used to identify the most important learning competencies. According to the guidelines on the use of MELCs, in determining the most essential learning competencies, the Department of Education recently collaborated with stakeholders from the Assessment Curriculum and Technology Research Center of the University of the Philippines, or the ACTRC, during which the descriptor, take note of the descriptor, this is another big word, hashtag endurance. So what do we mean by endurance as the primary determining factor to keep the 40%? A learning competency is considered enduring if it remains with learners long after a test or unit of study is completed, or if it's useful beyond a single test or unit of study. Examples of such learning competencies include research skills, reading comprehension, writing, map reading, and hypothesis testing, which are all essential in many professions and in everyday life. One of the many things that we have to remember, dear values ed teachers, is that the MELCs are directed for transfer of learning. When you say endurance, if it is meant for lifelong learning, meaning it will go beyond even after instruction has ended. It dwells. It means that it is or should be looked for in the real world, in the workplace, or in the practice of one's profession. We are always bent on asking every time we teach a particular lesson to the students that we always ask ourselves the question, in which area of life will this particular concept be used after the students get out of the school? One of the many things that we have to remember is that if we look at the competencies, we only don't consider competencies that are retained in memory, because that is not the meaning of endurance. But these are the competencies that are being used in the profession. Endurance means lifelong learning value. At the end of the quotation, you see on the screen, you will see the sources that DepEd use, and it is a document of Reeves, Manny, and Horrell. You may research that and you may read that if you want to see the full version of that. Now, how about in ESP Briefer or Edukasyon sa Pagpapakatao? What does it say about enduring learning competency? And I quote, says on page 28 of ESP MELCs Briefer, I quote, na kailangan ng mag-aaral ang learning competency na panghabang buhay o pangmatagalan na kahit tapos na siya sa pag-aaral ay patuloy na mailalapat niya ito sa mga konkretong sitwasyon ng buhay at sa anumang propesyon o curriculum exit na pipiliin niya ay hindi ito maaanod sa pagbabago ng panahon. I like the last line, hindi ito maaanod sa pagbabago ng panahon. Very striking. Now, all this that we are talking about are represented by the acronym REAL. For those of you who have been attending the advanced track of summer inset, I think the acronym REAL is no longer, it's not something new. You are familiar with this already. So REAL refers to the 4 criteria that are being used to assess whether a competency is considered power or simply supporting, which we will talk about later on in this webinar. This document that you can see now can be downloaded from the internet, and look at the source. The source is highlighted at the bottom part. So you could take the full copy of this one and you may read, because this is a very good article about the real criteria in prioritizing curriculum competencies. So what do we mean by real? R means readiness, hashtag readiness. E for endurance, hashtag endurance. What about A and L? A for assessment, hashtag assessment. And L for leverage. I can see hashtags now, hashtag leverage. Thank you for those who are participating actively. Now we are done on the second part, on the competencies. Now let's go to the other parts of the curriculum map. And as we go further, if endurance points out to transfer of learning to real life, how will that be facilitated in the classroom? How would that be exemplified? Especially now that we don't have face-to-face classes and that we have online or we have distance learning. Dear values and teachers, let's try to clarify first that when you say enduring, it does not mean you give students a lot of work to do. Again, endurance does not mean that students would need to work on the task for long hours of time. Let's be considerate to them, especially with our setup now. Endurance, however, would mean the transfer of learning will happen to real life situation. Now, looking at the certification assessment instrument in the area of lesson planning, what does it tell us about lifelong learning as another term for endurance? The second bullet is telling us that learning plan should be systematic and should contain progressive development of student skills, resulting in the understanding and culminating in transfer of learning. These things are pointed out as, three things are pointed out: acquisition, meaning making, and transfer. For those of you who have attended the summer inset for ValEd for 2 years already, I think these three keywords are no longer new, that you are familiar with them already. These are the core learning goals to promote lifelong learning, to promote enduring skills. What we are deciding on which competencies to tackle in the curriculum map as per guidelines of MELCS, we should be thinking about endurance or transfer of learning. This is also the same thing that we are asked to think about as we look at the certification assessment instrument. So, what does a learning plan contain, or what must we see in a learning plan according to PEAC certification assessment instrument? Our learning plan should contain the standard, okay? And then it should also contain procedure related to AMT learning goals, and at the end is the performance task. It should also present or contain activities and strategies done in procedures that describe students' actions more than teachers' action, which means that gone are the days that teachers would dominate the teaching learning process. This time, let the student dominate the learning process. Let them do the action. Next one, it should also contain values integration, parallel with the school's vision mission. Activities and questions must be related to honing the 7 C's of the 21st century skills. And then activities and questions should be related to social issues and community events, especially in values education. That's very important, that we hone our students to be socially responsive individuals. Activities and questions connecting to other subjects. It should also have integration in other subjects. And there is technology integration. Lastly, activities that are differentiated, it should contain differentiated activity showing the use of the multiple intelligences, so that we are really be honing the 21st century skills towards the performance of a certain task at the end of the learning unit. All right, in other words, since transfer of learning to real life is emphasized in the most essential learning competencies matrix, what you can see now, the question now is, how do we ensure its achievement in the curriculum design? Have you decided on your curriculum design given the pandemic that we have nowadays at this time? Whether we are looking at the 2016 curriculum guide or the 2020 MELCS or the PEAC certification assessment instrument, these three are pointing us to one and the same direction, and that is endurance, the transfer of learning to real life. Since this is the common destination, how then do we ensure that in our curriculum maps, the development of lesson is leading towards the transfer of learning? What are some of the specific techniques that we can do to reach this common destination that the three sources are pointing us to? These techniques are taken from the briefers of the MELCS matrix, and they can be summarized into 7. So let us see what are these 7 techniques used by the MELCS. So MELCS, or most essential learning competencies, is telling us or are telling us that in order to ensure endurance or transfer of learning, we can do any of the following. Again, just any of the following. It may not be true to all subjects. I mean, all the 7 may not be true in different subjects. There are subjects that may be adapting just 5 or 6. So let's go on. Number 1, what do? We unpack competencies into sub competencies or tasks. Number 2, we repeat competencies in another unit or grade level. Number 3, we follow up in higher grade levels. And number 4, we cluster with other competencies. Number 5, we merge with other competencies and we rephrase. Number 6, we focus on skill rather than on content. Number 7, we align with unit performance standard. Now, I'd like to highlight number 7 because as we now have the MELCS matrix pointing us to or telling us to prioritize performance standards, so number 7 among these 7 techniques is very important, and it will later on be expanded as we will know more techniques. Now, take note also that technique 4 and 5 may sound alike, but there is a difference because in number 4, which is clustering, there is no rephrasing. And again, allow me to reiterate that these techniques are related to MELCS. Again, you are not supposed to do all this. Check your curriculum guides, check your subject, and check if you will be able to apply this. And let's see how we will be doing this in this webinar. Okay, so let's go to the first technique. Okay, using technique 1, which is to unpack MELCS into sub-competencies. So the best technique that you can use if the competencies are too broad is to break them down into sub-competencies so that you could deliver your lesson systematically and so that the students can see better connections. Again, if you have attended our summer insets for values education, we have been exemplifying an unpacking the standards technique, and this one is related to that, which is breaking down into sub-component or sub-competencies. Thus, particular competencies like this example, like the example I'm pointing now or I'm presenting now, can be broken down into varied sub-competencies to help attain the mother competency. So you see the sub-competencies. All right, so that's the first technique. Now let's go to the second technique. For the second one, repeat most essential learning competencies in another grade level for reinforcement. This time, instead of using edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, I have here a sample from Filipino, since edukasyon sa pagpapakatao MELCS removed already those competencies which were repeated in other levels. So it means that it's not applicable in ESP. Looking at this example from Filipino, since the competency on nagagamit ang tamang kaalaman o karanasan sa pag-unawa ng napakinggang teksto is repeated from grade 1 to grade 3. So in teaching this competency per level, teacher may not dwell so much or may not give too much time as it will still be reinforced in other grade levels. So as a reminder to us teachers, Filipino teachers that are joining us today, before we make our curriculum map, it is better to understand first the entire curriculum guide of the subject. By understanding that some of the most essential learning competencies will be reinforced, you can give more focus on other important lessons as well. We now move to technique number 3. The third is to be aware that MELCs, or the most essential learning competencies, are being followed up in higher grade levels. That is why some of the competencies have been deleted and some have been retained. This example was lifted from Science MELCs since this technique may not be applicable in edukasyon sa pagpapakatao because unlike science, it is not following a spiraling or learning progression pattern. Now, this technique reminds us teachers that if the students have been introduced already to a competency and then reinforced again in higher levels, we should be aware of the leveling on how the competencies could be treated progressively so that our students, especially the intelligent ones, will not get bored because of the repetition. All right, number 4, or technique number 4. Let us now go to the fourth technique. That's what I'm presenting now. Based on the MELCs briefer, 2 or more learning competencies are clustered if they have the same objective or learning intention and thus can be combined into one comprehensive learning competency. Or learning competencies could be subsumed with other related learning competency. Now let us take a look at the example from grade 7, quarter 4 of Edukasyon sa Pagpapakatao. I have here 3 different competencies, but later on you will see that they were clustered. Because if you'll study the competencies, they may be stated differently, but they have the same objective or learning intention. So what's the first one? 13.1. Nakikilala na ang mga pangarap ay batayan ng mga pagpupunyagi tungo sa makabuluhan at maligayang buhay. Next one is 15.2. Natatanggap ang kawalan o kakulangan sa mga personal na salik na kailangan sa pinaplanong kursong akademiko o teknikal, bukasyonal, negosyo o hanap buhay. And the third one, which is 16.1, nakikilala ang kahalagahan ng pag-aaral bilang paghahanda sa pagninegosyo at paghahanap buhay at mga hakbang sa paggawa ng career plan. If you'll be looking at the 3 competencies, somehow they are targeting one learning intention. And so we clustered them. MELCs clustered them. And now we have this identified most essential learning competency. Nakikilala na ang mga pangarap ang batayan ng mga pagpupunyagi tungo sa makabuluhan at maligayang buhay sa mga aspetong personal na salik na kailangan sa pinaplanong kursong akademiko o teknikal, bukasyonal, negosyo o hanap buhay. Pagkilala sa mga kahalagahan ng pag-aaral bilang paghahanda sa pagninegosyo at paghahanap buhay at mga hakbang sa paggawa ng career plan. So that is our 4th technique, clustering other competencies. Learning competencies could be subsumed with other learning competency. We now move to the 5th one. Okay, based on the MELCs briefer, as I have mentioned also a while ago, 2 or more learning competencies could be merged, kanina clustered, this time merged. And if they have the same objective again and learning intention, and thus can be combined and have them rephrased into one comprehensive learning competency. Let's see the example from grade 9 ikatlong markahan of the edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. There are two competencies clustered and rephrased. The first one is 10.1. Natutukoy ang indikasyon na may kalidad o kagalingan sa paggawa ng isang gawain o produkto. Number 2, or the second one, 12.1, na ipaliliwanag ang kahalagahan ng pamamahala ng paggamit ng oras. So we merged them and we rephrased into one most essential learning competency. Natutukoy ang indikasyon na may kalidad o kagalingan sa paggawa ng isang gawain o produkto kaakibat ang gustong paggamit ng oras para rito. Okay, so that's the fifth technique. We now move to the sixth technique. The sixth technique is focused on skill rather than content. Again, if we want to promote transfer of learning, we have to make sure that students can apply the skills more than just learning the content. An ESP Curriculum Guide of 2016 included is this competency na ipapaliwanag na ang pagkakaroon ng kaayusan, kaunlaran, at maisusulong ang kabutihang panlahat kung ang lahat ng tao ay may paninindigan sa tamang paggamit ng kapangyarihan at pagmamalaga sa kapaligiran. Okay, MELCs focus more on performance standard. That's why instead of saying na ipapaliwanag, MELCs now, or there is now a rephrase essential or most essential learning competency, focusing not on the content. That's why it used the verb na isusulong. Na isusulong ang kaunlaran at kabutihan, ang kabutihang panlahat kung ang lahat ng tao ay may paninindigan sa tamang paggamit ng kapangyarihan at pangangalaga sa kalikasan. Remember na ipapaliwanag points to content and it is not enough. Students need to be led further on how they can apply to solve real-life problems involving deliberate actions. Okay, we are down to the seventh technique. So our seventh technique is we will check if the learning competencies included in the most essential learning competencies are really in line with the unit performance standard. We have said that all the competencies should be anchored on the standards. So how do we check that alignment? Let us look at the verbs. Take a look at the sample there. Na isasagawa, that's the verb in performance standard. And there you have among the competencies, or the competencies are nakapagsusuri at nakasasang-ayon. Okay, looking at these verbs, looking at the competencies, these are verbs that indicate more on content again, which may not be enough for the student to perform appropriate actions. So always ask yourself as a teacher if the competencies will lead your students to transfer, or do they have enduring value? Do the competencies have enduring value? Will this alignment provide endurance? Looking at our diagram, in this example, we can clearly say that there is a gap between the performance standard and the competencies. Let's take a look for another example. Let's take a look at another example. Are the competencies aligned again with the performance standard? So the performance standard is na isasagawa. The competencies are nakikilala, natutukoy. Given these gaps, how do we align standards and competencies to ensure transfer to real life or endurance for lifelong learning? What process can be done? Okay, that's the question. What process can be done? I'd like you to take a look at this picture. Okay. Now you see the title, Streamlining the Teaching and Learning of the K-12 Curriculum. We are now heading to the second part of our webinar. But I'd like you not to focus only on the title, but I'd like you to focus on what you see on screen. What does the picture reveal to you? What is shown on screen? Hashtag. Probably many of you would say, okay, I see hashtag water. You may say, I see flowing water, hashtag flowing water. Or you may say hashtag uniformity. Some would say, I see calmness. And some would say one direction. I see one direction. Now, all these terms would lead us to streamlining. What is streamlining? Streamlining is a physical thing. When the water is very calm, as what you could see in the picture, and is flowing in one direction, especially when it is falling, you will not see overlaps. If you look at the picture, there's no overlap. There are no overlaps. You will see streamlines, and this create patterns. Actually, what you see or what we're saying is an engineering feat. Engineers are trained how to do this. In the natural world, this occurs naturally, but engineers could produce this as 24/7 occurrence. So it could be natural, it could be man-made. So when we say streamline, what do we mean? Take a look at your slide, or take a look at our slide. Streamline means that it's a path traced by a massless particle moving with the flow, and the flow follows a particular direction. And speaking about the flow, let's talk about two kinds of flow. Now take a look at the picture. What do you see? It is moving in one direction again. There are no arrows pointing at the opposite directions, nor do we see waves. We only see lines, right? Because this is what we call laminar flow. I repeat that, laminar flow. Everyone, those who are joining online virtually, please do give a hashtag laminar flow. What is a laminar flow? Fluid particles follow a smooth path in layers or laminae. Laminae is another word for layers, with each layer moving parallel to each other without mixing, thus visible stream. Thus we have visible streamlines. Okay, now, so that is laminar flow. Let's take a look at another kind of flow. What do you notice? Compare the first flow, that is laminar, to the second one. What do you see? For the second flow, do you still see lines? Are they moving towards the same direction? Do they overlap? You call this flow as turbulent flow. What do you mean by turbulent flow? Fluid particles move in a rough path, and there are cross currents and mixing of layers. Thus, there are swirling zones. Because the layers overlap, instead of the water flowing in the same direction, in some parts, the water flow turns back, overlaps, and rides on another layer. That's why we have swirling zones. Why are we talking about these two flows, laminar and turbulent flow? What are these two flows? What is the relevance of these two flows in school curriculum? Okay, as you look at our curriculum map and as you do curriculum mapping, you can produce as a teacher or as an educator or as an administrator, you could produce either laminar or turbulent flow of curriculum. For example, in the English curriculum, the flow, looking at the arrows, the flow is very complicated. Looking at the image, you cannot determine the specific flow. Maybe you could start anywhere, then you go back or start somewhere else. As we face our students with this kind of curriculum, we will surely have difficult time letting them see connections. In this kind of flow, is this kind of flow helping us achieve the goal of transferring learning to real life? What's your answer? All right, yes. The answer is not a yes, but a no. I am affirming those who said no. On the other hand, take a look at the screen. If you look at this illustration, what is desirable is the design of this curriculum, which is really to have laminar flow. Look at the columns from left to right, then follow from the unit content down to the resources, then the arrows would indicate the connections of all the parts in the curriculum map, and you will see alignments. All right. So the question now is that, what is streamlining all about? Streamlining, dear values ed teachers, is not simply reducing competencies. Let me repeat that. Streamlining is not simply reducing competencies. It is a process that allows us to establish alignments among standards, competencies, assessment, activities, and resources, thus creating a laminar flow of our curriculum. We don't want the students' learning experience to be turbulent, especially our own experience. So to avoid turbulence as early as the planning and designing stage, we need to start clarifying. And that is one of our goals this afternoon. So how do we clarify? So what are the benefits of streamlining? This may sound new tasks on our shoulders as teachers. You might probably say, what is that again? Is that another task to do? Well, you must think that the process may be difficult, but just have in mind that once it is over, everything will be done smoothly as you teach inside the classroom or through your online teaching. With streamlining, there is a clarity of process. Connections are established, and as designer, teachers establish the connection later on to the students, and so streamlining would benefit not only the teacher but also our students. So if there is clarity of process, this will bring us to the second effect. What is that second? You become an efficient and effective teacher as you start to begin with the end in mind. You know where to lead the students to. You have direction. By looking at the verb, which will help establish the connection, you are focusing on the skills leading to transfer both horizontally and vertically. Take note, when we say vertical learning progression, we develop and scaffold skills towards the attainment of the performance standards in order to attain endurance or lifelong learning value. There is a conscious scaffolding leading to an authentic evidence of learning that is an evidence of achieving the performance standards. So these are the benefits of streamlining. Now, going back to the PEAC certification assessment instrument, these are the ingredients that the certifiers will be looking for when they examine your curriculum map. So what's the keyword again? Look at those highlighted. Okay, I see answers. Yes, the word is alignment. Take note of that. So if connections have been established, Will the flow become laminar already, or would it still be turbulent? Okay, so let's move on. So streamlining could still be done in two techniques. We do this to move from turbulence to laminar flow. Technique A is aligning content standards and competencies with performance standard, and technique B is connection with technique A, which is identifying power and supporting competencies and clustering this. Now let us try to see how one is different from the other. Let's start with technique letter A. And again, remember the goal is endurance. And endurance means lifelong learning value. Okay, looking at this document again. In order to help us lead our students to transfer, we are guided by this very important document, affirming that endurance is the primary determining factor for a learning competency to be considered enduring, that will last, that will stay with the learners, even the learners are done already with tests or learning unit, or they have completed already a study or beyond the single test. So let's start using these steps. Let's start with the boxes colored yellow. I hope you could see them. What are these words that you see on the boxes, in the boxes? So they are acquisition, meaning making, and transfer, transfer goal, and performance tests. You see content and performance standards too. You see the unit topic, but the most important thing that I want you to look into are the arrows. Why do you think they are arranged in that way? What do the arrows mean? Why is the content standard placed under the performance standards? Why is transfer at the top? We will learn to answer that later on as we complete the different parts of our unpacking diagram. Again, those of you who have been attending the Values Ed Summer Inset, this unpacking diagram is not something new. We have been using this for 2 years already in our insets. Okay, so technique A is aligning content standard and competencies with performance standards. And we have 7 steps for technique A. Okay, I will no longer be reading them one by one because we will be using them one by one. So to do technique A, let's start with step number 1. What is step number 1? Step number 1 of technique A, we copy the content and performance standards, and we just simply write the unit topic. Again, the question is, where do we get them? You see the standards in the 2016 curriculum guide or the MELCS matrix. Okay, so you just simply get the content and performance standards and the unit topic and put them in our diagram. So you have now in our diagram our standards. So we lift the said standards, the content and the performance standard, and we put them in the boxes under the performance standards and content standard and indicate the unit topic. And then what do we have now? In the discussion, in the purpose of the discussion in this webinar, we are using the topic on karahasan sa paaralan, or if we translate that in English, ending violence in school. And with the topic, we have this performance standard. The student will be able to promote effective ways to stop and or avoid violence in school. It is connected to the content standard, and this content standard is the means to achieve the performance standard. The students will be able to show understanding of the cause and effect of the common violence in school. And so what do we do now? The question is, given that we are leading the student to the attainment of the performance task from the performance standard, what do we need to remember? Remember that the transfer goal and performance tasks are anchored on the performance standard. Okay, so write the performance standards first and select the highest order verb looking at the performance standard. In this case, we have the verbs promote, stop, and avoid. Among the three, which would lead the students to lifelong learning? So the verb promote could be the one that could lead student to transfer, which will be used to formulate our transfer goal. Our transfer goal is the one at the middle, which is composed of 4 parts. It should begin with the phrase students on their own, and in the long run will be able to, so you just add the verb in higher order plus the specific product or the specific performance that the students will be doing plus the real world purpose, and that will be used in doing the performance task following the GRASPS format. The verb and the real world purpose must be in your performance narrative, so that's in the third box, to show connections of the three: the performance standard, your transfer goal, and then the performance task narrative. So this is what we call making clear connections, doing alignment. You are not just giving students any other task, but they are given a task that will lead them to the attainment of the performance standard, making their learning endure and giving lifelong value to whatever learning they will achieve. Moving on, so after step 2, we now go back to the document and we will write the transfer goal on top of the transfer goal box and the performance task, the narrative, or probably only the summary of the performance task narrative if the space will not be enough. Now, after unpacking the performance standard, we now have to review the curriculum guide and the school curriculum map in terms of the competencies, including the most essential learning competencies, and unpack the competencies if needed. Okay, now, looking at using the Edukasyon sa Pagpapakatao Curriculum Guide, the 2016 Curriculum Guide, for grade 8 quarter 4, it has 16 competencies. Okay, 16 competencies. If you will be comparing it side by side with MELCS, in MELCS you'll see 12 competencies instead of 16. How do we reconcile that? Let's see. Using step 3, let's review our 2016 curriculum guide together with our school curriculum map. Let's also include the MELCS, and we take out competencies that are not directly aligned with performance standard. So what I'm using now, what I'm referring to you now is the 2016 curriculum guide. You will see that there are competencies that crossed out or eliminated, meaning these are no longer needed in the achievement of the performance standard. But please take note, as what we have highlighted, streamlining of curriculum is not just simply removing competencies or not just dropping competencies. Because look at what we did here. What we would like to suggest as we cross out these competencies, we are not totally removing them, but these competencies on the topic sexualidad could be merged with grade 7 first quarter topic on tungkulin bilang nagdadalaga at nagbibinata. Okay, so I hope that's clear. All right, we further assess if there are competencies which are not at the service of the performance standard. And so if you will look at our slide, we still have, again, competencies that we crossed out. But I have mentioned, we are not removing them, but what we are trying to suggest is that the competencies on the topic agwat teknolohikal could be merged with grade 7 fourth quarter with the topic on kursong akademiko, vocational, at technical. Yes, do we have still examples? Okay, we further assess if there are competencies which are not at the service of the performance standard. And so we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 competencies crossed out, but we are suggesting that these 5 competencies under this topic on epekto ng migrasyon sa pamilyang Pilipino could be merged with grade 8 first quarter topics on family. All right, so putting side by side the 2016 curriculum guide and the 2020 MEX, what do we have now? From the 16 competencies in the learning unit of 2016 curriculum guide for grade 8 quarter 4, we now have 4 remaining competencies on the topic mga karahasan sa paaralan. Okay. As other learning competencies were removed, but subsumed with other, not removed, but they were subsumed with other learning competencies. While in the MELCS matrix, the same 4 competencies were retained on the topic mga karahasan sa paaralan, plus there were 4 more competencies as one topic from quarter 3 was brought down to quarter 4 on the topic katapatan sa salita at gawa. It was the matrix which brought the topic down to quarter 4 from quarter 3. Okay, so we bring the two together in one quarter. So how would that be possible? Because in the MELCS, katapatan sa salita at gawa is in the 4th quarter taken from the 3rd quarter, while in the 2016 CG, it is included in the 3rd quarter. So let's reconcile the two documents. Okay, how do we do that? We have these 2 content and performance standards from the grade 8 quarter 4 2016 CG and MELCS. And out of the 2 performance standards, we have now a merged transfer goal for the remaining 2 units with related topics. The units then may be merged and have a merged transfer goal for a common performance task so that these are covered in only 1 quarter. So what will I do now with the remaining competencies is that I'll be classifying them. But before I classify them, let's transfer all of this to our diagram. So we have now our merge transfer goal based on our 2 performance standards and the summary of our performance narrative. Here we exemplify how to unpack transfer goal and performance tasks from the performance standard. Okay, so before we classify, take a look at the screen so that you will be remembering things. Let us first transfer, we have transferred to this diagram already what we have shown you a while ago. This time, what I will do, I will be classifying the remaining competencies. So this is step 4. Classify competencies according to AMT. For those of you who have attended our summer inset, values education teachers, I know that you know already AMT. Can you make hashtags now about the meaning of AMT? What is A? What is M? And what is T? Okay, I see hashtags now. Yes, very good. A means acquisition. M means make meaning or meaning making. And T means transfer. How I wish I could give you prizes for those of you who answered. Now that we know what are AMT, let's now classify the remaining competencies based on what we did in the previous slides. So in this slide, we have one competency for acquisition. What is our sign or signal that the competency is acquisition? Again, look at the verb, nakikilala. In English, recognizes. And then we have two for make meaning, nasusuri at naipapaliwanag. Take a look at the verb. They are very different from nakikilala. Nasusuri could be analyzed, at naipapaliwanag in English is explain. Two meaning-making competencies and one for learning goals of acquisition. We move on. More competencies are labeled as A and M based on the content standard. So we have here nakikilala again for one, acquisition, transfer goal, and then nasusuri at naipapaliwanag again for make meaning. Now, for those of you who are still confused on how to identify learning goals as AMT, as acquisition, make meaning, and transfer, we have here a table or a diagram showing the list of the verbs under acquisition, the list of the verbs under make meaning, and the list of the verbs under transfer. For you to easily identify the verbs under AMT, take a look at the ones being enhanced under the said goals. So for acquisition, being promoted or introduced and enhanced are facts, vocabulary, definitions. For make meaning, we have principles and generalization or formulation of big ideas of discipline. While for transfer, we have performance or product. Okay? Now, this time, we identify our transfer goals, which are necessary in attaining the performance standard. We go back to our unpacking diagram, and our unpacking diagram contains now step 5 and step 6. Step 5 involves unpacking the essential question and the enduring understanding with make meaning cluster of competencies, establishing the link with the content standard and the performance standard. Okay, take note of that, or the performance task. Meaning making, however, is the link between acquisition and transfer. Students, take note of that, teachers, values ed teachers, students cannot do transfer unless they are able to acquire knowledge and skills, and you cannot ask them to make meaning unless they have acquired the knowledge and skills. In this case, acquisition and meaning making are both at the service of transfer. So after unpacking the M, and we know we also unpack the A, we establish the link with content standard and performance tasks. So you see now in our diagram, how do we make connections and how do we show the link between the performance standard and the content standard. That the content standard with the make meaning and acquisition, these are all at the attainment, at the service of the performance standard or transfer. All right, so we go to step 7. Step 7 is to determine the assessment for acquisition and meaning making. For the acquisition that could be included in the quarterly assessment, we have identification of factors for care and school safety. While for meaning making, that could be included in the written work through situation analysis in the guided generalization as we develop student skills, improving and relating this exercise to real life situations. So just to make connections again, when you make your assessment, you should be able to connect or to align your assessment with your competencies for acquisition and your competencies for make meaning. And all this assessment should lead the students to master the necessary skill in order for him or her to do the transfer independently or to show enduring skills. So looking at the diagram, what can you say now? What can you say about the flow? Is it laminar? Is it still laminar? Or is it laminar or still turbulent? Now that we are able to make the connection, can you say that it is laminar? Can you now say that the connection are established? That the activities are well connected? I can now make my students, so if I am a teacher looking at this diagram, I can say that I can now make my students acquire, make meaning, and transfer. So I am sure that with this kind of flow, our students will also be led to make connections and that we will not have a hard time teaching them. Now, after clarifying technique A, which involves unpacking the competencies, we go to technique B. From the 16 competencies in the learning unit, we now have 12 core competencies as other learning competencies were removed and subsumed with other learning competencies. The question now is, can these skills lead to endurance or transfer? Would these remaining 8 core competencies or competencies enough to lead the students to enduring skills or to make transfer of learning? So what do we do? Right, we now move to technique B. And technique B is identifying power and supporting competencies, and then we cluster them. Okay, the keywords now are power competencies and supporting competencies. Make your hashtags now using power and supporting competencies. Very good, those who are participating actively by giving their hashtags using our webinar's keywords or big ideas. Now, what are power standards, or what do we mean when we say power competencies? Power standards are the most essential standards for students to master because they give focus for teachers on what to teach. They are key learning that promote higher level of thinking skills. They present to us our priorities in terms of the academic standards, and they provide purpose or reason for learning a specific competency. To make this definition more, a little bit more clear and understandable, let's take a look at this picture. Okay, think of power competencies as fence post holes. If you were to build a fence, you need to have sturdy post holes, which means to say you need to provide the curricular competencies that will lead the students to the attainment of the performance standard, and these power competencies should pass all the criteria of our acronym REAL. I hope you could still remember REAL. R for readiness, E for endurance, A for attainment assessment, and L for leverage. But these fence post holes cannot stand long and cannot make the fence sturdy without the supporting competencies represented by the fence rails. Thus, the supporting competencies contributes to or serve to the attainment of the power competencies. If you think of a ladder, for example, just to continue making an analogy, if you think of a ladder, for example, the steps on a ladder will be the support, and they will lead you to your goal or the goal of the power competencies. So let's try to look at the table on your screen, on our screen. The question is, which of the competencies are power and which are support competencies? What do we use to determine the support and the power competencies? How do we know them? What criteria do we use? So we have there on the slide, readiness, endurance, assessment, and leverage. And after doing this exercise, we can say that indeed, the second set of competencies are the core or the power competencies. Okay, how do we do that? What are other steps to follow in order to identify power and supporting competencies? So how can identification and clustering of power and supporting competencies be done for streamlining the curriculum? So what are the steps? Number one, we need to identify first power and supporting competencies using the real criteria from core sets of competencies. Second, we make clusters of power and supporting competencies. And the third one, we sequence clusters with the last related to the performance task. And lastly, we set the budget of time for teaching the cluster. Again, you might ask, why are we doing this? There are a lot of tasks to do. What we want to prioritize here, are the power competencies, because we always want to recognize our limitations. We are at times pressed for time, and most especially in this new normal that a school calendar will be shortened. So we really need to identify our competencies so that this will really unite the supporting competencies. Okay, let's move on. In so doing, technique letter B, which components are critical for our students to know and understand? Which component, according to our state assessment data, do we especially need to emphasize? Which competencies represent concepts and skills that will endure? So we have our criteria, and so let us try to understand each one. Let's go first to readiness. When the competency represents learning that is essential for succeeding grade level, it has readiness. The particular keyword is ready. So the question that you could ask, dear values ed teacher, will my student be ready for the next lesson? If I teach a topic or competency, will they be ready to understand it and the next lesson? Therefore, we could also ask the following questions that I am projecting now. Now, I have here an example competency for readiness in edukasyon sa pagpapakatao. Nakikilala na may dignidad ang bawat tao anuman ang kanyang kalagayang panlipunan, kulay, lahi, edukasyon, relihiyon at iba pa. This is considered readiness or competency for readiness because it represents learning that is essential for success in a new unit. Let's move to the next one. What do we mean by endurance? When the competency represents learning that goes beyond one course or grade level and is representative of a concept or skill that is important in life, it has endurance. Take note, values ed teachers, that endurance is equal to, yes, to lifelong value. So these are the questions that we need to answer to measure enduring skills. From edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, I have this example. na isasagawa ng mga mag-aaral ang pagsasabuhay ng mga pagpapahalaga at bertud na magpapaunlad ng kanyang buhay bilang nagdadalaga at nagbibinata. The word pagsasabuhay tells us that there is enduring skill. The third one is assessment. Maybe this is not so values ed, okay? But at times there are skills or competencies in values ed that are included in the national assessment, okay? So when the competency is often tested in an achievement or admission exams or for a job, it has value for assessment. Perhaps for values ed, it has really value for a job, okay? So will these particular competencies be tested in national, international assessment? If yes, that is assessment. The last one is leverage. When the competency represents learning that is applied both within the content area and other content areas, it has leverage, meaning to say multidisciplinary. So the question now is, does this standard has multidisciplinary connections? Is this standard relevant with other disciplines? Where can students use this standard aside from values education? So I have here the one from Edukasyon sa Pagpapakatao na ipapaliwanag kung bakit may lipunang politikal, prinsipyo ng subsidiarity at prinsipyo ng pagkakaisa. If you look at these competencies, where do we relate it? What subject can we link it? Yes, it could be linked with Araling Panglipunan or other social sciences. And so we have now this table. We will now identify unit power and supporting competencies with real. Okay, so we just simply put now our competencies and then we evaluate the competencies using real, R for readiness, E for endurance, A for assessment, and L for leverage. Looking at the first table, we have one competencies with straight check, and so we identify that as power competency, and the other two are supporting competency. The next table shows that the last competency has straight check for the real criteria, and so this is our power competency, and we have 3 supporting competencies. So in summary, we have 2 power competencies and 6 supporting competencies in grade 8 quarter 4. This leads us now to step 2 of technique B, which is to identify the budget of time by clustering the competencies. How do we cluster the competencies? So we have this table, and then we identify the budget of time. So you can determine the budget of time through this table. If we are given, for example, 8 weeks for a quarter, let us say you have 3 meetings per week for values education or for edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, then we target 24 days. And in cluster 1, because the foundation needs to be sturdy, students should be able to make meaning and transfer, and so we allotted 1st to 3rd weeks for this one, for the power competency and its supporting competency. So that would be equivalent to 9 days. So our power competency is nakikilala ang kahalagahan ng karapatan and so on, and we have 2 supporting competencies. The next table shows the next power competencies with the 3 supporting competencies. Our power competency is na ipapaliwanag na tungkulin ng tao ang kaugnay sa buhay, ang ingatan ang kanyang sarili at umiwas sa kamatayan o sitwasyong magbibigay sa kanya ng panganib. Just like the first cluster, we are giving this a budget of time of 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks or 9 days also. For the third one, we are making another cluster for the power competencies and supporting competencies for transfer. So we allotted time for performance tasks. So maybe we could have the 7th and the 8th week equivalent to 6 days if there are 3 meetings per week for the performance task. So you put them together, all the days counted a while ago, or all the weeks that we've counted in the budget of time. So we have total of 8 weeks or 24 days. Okay. And so we look at the 3 clusters of 8 core competencies from 2 merged units for 6 weeks, 6 weeks or 8 weeks for the additional 2 weeks for performance tasks. After clustering and showing the connection of competencies with the standards and putting a budget of time, do you now see a smooth flow or turbulent flow pa rin? I hope this time you could see a laminar flow. So we go back to our sample diary curriculum map. We're done with the first part, we're done with the second part, and we now move to the third part, which contains the assessment, the activities, and the resources. And we also go to the last part, which is important for values education teachers, the alignment of all the parts to the institutional core values. And so we have this mapping of assessment and activities with unit power and supporting competencies. So for each power competency and the supporting competencies, we need to assign an assessment. And remember, for many of you who are doing dual modes of instructional delivery, you have offline and online activities which must be planned out so that our students could get the needed support and resources. This question, or the question is, what can we use as our source? Where do we get all this? I am happy to tell you that you may get activities now from our PEAC Learning Modules Exemplar, which you could download from the PEAC portal. So I am very happy to share that the Learning Modules Exemplars are now available for downloads and that you could use them as your reference, perhaps, as you make your own learning modules in your school. So if you look at the PEAC module exemplar, you will see the following learning activities on pages 17 to 23. This is a sample offline activity of grade 8, quarter 4. It's offline because students are asked to study legal basis of child protection policy. So they just simply have printed copies of the document and they will be studying the document. Another offline activity is journaling. For this, if the student will be at home for distance learning, they could just simply do this using a journal notebook. And maybe, so how can the teacher check that if it's distance learning? Maybe the student could just take a screenshot of the page containing the journal entry, and then that could be sent to the teacher. The next one is an example of online activity for grade 8, quarter 4. This is online because students are encouraged to download a copy of the UNICEF article, and then they will be making a virtual think, pair, share. If it's not possible to have virtual think, pair, and share with their classmates, maybe the members of the family could be invited and that they could take a video of them having the virtual think, pair, share. Or maybe they are inside under one roof, but they are having Google Meet and doing virtual think, pair, share. Another sample of online activity is a e-guided generalization, wherein students will be submitting their accomplished guided generalization sheet through Google Classroom. Okay, so those are just few of the many samples that you could see if you download PEAC Learning Modules Exemplar. Okay, now going back to our mapping of assessment and activities. So with the suggested activities, let us go back to the mapping. Take a look at the mapping of the activities and assessment with unit power and supporting competencies, and look at the horizontal alignment and vertical progression. I hope you see connections. We pay attention. In order to see connection, you pay attention to the verb. So for example, in our curriculum map, if we say that our competency is nasusuri, then our assessment should be something about case analysis so that there is alignment. if our learning competencies is na ipapaliwanag, and so we give a certain type of assessment where student will explain. That's why we have short constructed response. And we also design our learning activities, whether offline and online, connected and parallel or aligned with our competencies and standards. Same goes with our resources and institutional core values. Let's go back to the alignment. We make the alignment visible again by connecting arrows, and the alignment will be very important in the process of certification. This is always, or there is always an alignment, and the alignment we are looking for is horizontal and vertical. Going back to PEAC CAI, can we now say that we have made a curriculum map in accordance to the standards of compliance or to the standards of competencies? This brings us to the next part. The next part is we determined our budget of time. We have unpacked our learning competencies, and so we now go to this unit learning calendar. Take a look at the unit calendar. What is given emphasis among the 3 learning goals? That's a question. Take a look at the learning unit calendar. What among the 3 learning goals of acquisition, make meaning, and transfer, which are being highlighted or given a lot of emphasis? May I see your answers? Hashtags, acquisition, make meaning, or transfer? The answer is yes, you're correct. Meaning making and transfer. We give more emphasis on the 2 because we want to promote lifelong learning. Okay, take note that this is a quarterly guide. This calendar is a quarterly guide. Okay, the question is, are you going to give this to your students? The answer is no. Students will only get the weekly activities and the related learning materials. We call it as weekly learning guide. Students don't need to see a whole month of work. This document can be uploaded or distributed every Monday morning so that students can plan the week activities in order that they will be able to secure materials needed. For those doing online learning, we don't want students to be exposed going out. So please think of materials that are available at home, and take note that these activities should come from the curriculum map. So you're not making new sets of activities, they're teachers, they're values and teachers. Because if the laminar flow is established already in the curriculum map, then learning will become very smooth for the students, and you will not find it hard to deliver your lessons because everything is systematic, clear, detailed, connected, and aligned. Now, another thing, when we talk about values education teachers, we focus on the institutional core values, but we can also choose values that are directly related to our subject area. Valuing should be smoothly integrated to, and valuing in our lesson plan should be recurring, just like the essential question. So in summary, let me ask you, as you make your curriculum or your school curriculum for your recertification, what are your 3 sources again? Right, may I see your hashtags? Yes, the 2016 curriculum guide, the MELCS matrix, and the PEAC certification assessment instrument. These are the 3 important documents that we need to utilize and to incorporate as we plan the school's curriculum. These 3 should have to be together because they are connected and point us to one direction, one destination. And that is to promote lifelong learning, enduring or ensuring endurance. Going back to our curriculum map, so if you will look at the recertification requirement of alignment in curriculum map, where do you find the standards again? That is from the 2016 curriculum guide or the MELCS matrix, together with the competencies. The question is, who will make the plan? Who will make and plan the assessment activities and resources? Would this be given by the curriculum guides? No, teachers will be the one to plan and make assessment, activities, and resources which are all aligned to the standards and competencies. Teachers who are designer, assessor, and facilitator of learning will be the one to design. Now, where do we get our institutional core values? From the school's vision, mission, philosophy, objectives. And why are we doing all this? Simple. Our goal is to teach enduring skills for work and life in the 21st century. And how are we supposed to do this? Let's go back to the techniques. We ensure endurance or transfer of learning by doing any of the following items we have exemplified a while ago. And we could also look at the technique in streamlining, which are aligning content standard and competencies with the performance standard and identifying the power and supporting competencies and clustering them. Okay, so we have technique B and technique A. But if you want to focus on the budget of time, then you are doing technique B, clustering, prioritizing, and dividing the budget of time. I'm very sure that there are a lot of things running in your head now, values ed teachers. What are the tasks that lie ahead? What will the new normal be all about? Our fears and anxieties. Some of us are excited. Congratulations for those who are excited. Some of us may be challenged. That's normal. And I hope this exercise, this experience that you have this afternoon will bring out the best in all of us as values ed teachers. While the task may be daunting, I'd like to leave you with this important quote from Jack Ma. Never give up. Today is hard. Tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine. Good afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Ina, for your very clear and comprehensive discussion on streamlining and the use of MELCS. Now, as we were checking the comments for questions, we saw mostly hashtags and found only these two. Yes. Okay, for the first question, may kaibahan po ba talaga ang clustering at merging ng mga competencies?
Okay, if you look at the two, when you look at the briefer, they seem alike. But for the clustering or for the merging, we are highlighting that when we put together two competencies with the same learning content or learning objective, we are trying to rephrase them into one comprehensive competency. While in the clustering, we try to put together competencies. They may be stated differently, but they have the same learning intention too. So when you look at them, they may seem alike, but we highlight rephrasing for merging.
Okay. Thank you, Mamina. The second question from Miss Venus Daydayan is said, hi po, our book in ESP is using English as medium of instruction. Upon writing the lesson plans or the learning plans, are we going to translate the competencies or just copy it? Because up to now, we are really confused. Please enlighten us.
Okay, the edukasyon sa pagpapakatao, if we will look at the curriculum guide, both the 2016 and the 2020 MELCS matrix, both of these documents are written in Tagalog. But what I would like to, as an advice to the teacher, you go back to the context of your school. If in the school you are asked to teach values ed or edukasyon sa pagpapakatao in English, then you need to translate the Tagalog version of the curriculum guides in English, okay, to answer the needs of your students. Because For example, we look at the context of our students. If they are not good in Tagalog, maybe those who are living in Mindanao who are very good, who are not really so good in Tagalog. So translation could be needed for that. But if you are following DepEd, you're following what is in the curriculum guide, so that's not a problem. Here we are not really looking at the problem of language or of the medium of instruction. Maybe what we could focus on is not really the language, but we focus on how can we really teach values education with the attainment of AMT learning goals, because the 3 learning goals would answer to the way we teach values, which is we begin with the cognitive, and then we go to conceptual, reflective, and acting. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope our question sender is made clear already. I mean, the question was answered. Okay, now for those who are asking for the learning modules are now available for download from the PEAC website. You just have to go to the quick links area that's on the right side of the web page. Look for the learning module repository, find the subject that you need, and you can download. The handouts for all this week's webinar series will also be available for download from the PEAC website. And to those who tuned in late or those who wish to watch this webinar again, you can visit the FB page of the Private Education Assistance Committee for the replay. We also would like to invite everyone on June 17, that's a Wednesday, at 10 a.m. and the Wednesdays thereafter until July 1 for the senior high school webinars. Now again, Mamina, thank you very much for your sharing.
Can you just say few
yes,
words?
Of course.
Opo, I just want to thank you, Ma'am May, Ma'am Presi, Ma'am Doris, and Dr. Rapatan for the guidance that you have been giving us and for the trainings you have given us to hone us as better teachers. I also would like to thank the PEAC Values Ed group, my co-admin and teachers from the South College Antipolo who joined us in this afternoon's webinar. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening and for really participating by giving your hashtags.
Okay. Again, thank you, Ma'am Ina. And thank you to our viewers, especially for those who have been following us on the webinar series since Monday. We hope that this program have helped you and will help you as you prepare for the new normal this school year. Let me also thank the people behind this webinar, our Executive Director, Ms. Doris Ferrer, our TDE Officer, Ms. Presi Labao, our Junior High School Consultant, Dr. Mike Rapatan, our IT and IM and Data Privacy Officer, Mr. Butchie Barola, our IT staff, Sir Terence Ryan and Ms. Rachel, and our TDU family, Sirs Chris and Dondon, and Ms. Lani, and the PEAC National Secretariat. Again, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Bye.